Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into what I like to call the ultimate dead end. We're going to tackle a seriously fascinating question. Why on earth did God lead Israel right into a massive trap? I mean, think about it for a second. If you're the one designing an escape route for, say, 2 million people, the absolute last thing you'd ever do is completely box them in, right? But when we look at the famous Exodus account, that's exactly what we see. We find an all-knowing deity intentionally cornering his own people between a totally impassable sea and a heavily armed military force. So why do it? Well, looking at the ancient accounts, we see that God deliberately bypassed the shorter, much easier route through Philistine country. Why? Because taking that direct path meant facing immediate head-on war, and that could have literally terrified the fleeing Israelites into running right back to Egypt. Instead, Moses got the instruction to turn around and set up camp near Pi-Hahiroth, right there on the coast. And hey, this wasn't just some cosmic wrong turn, this was a highly specific, totally calculated maneuver. And you really have to notice the specific geographical setup here. The text says they were hemmed in by the desert. This was completely by design, meant to make the Israelites look, frankly, totally confused. To anyone watching from the outside, and by that I mean the Egyptian pharaoh, it looked exactly like they were just wandering aimlessly and had somehow managed to tangle themselves up in this massive, inescapable trap. I mean, you've got mountains on one side, the sea dead ahead, and a vast desert blocking the rear. So seeing this glaring vulnerability, Pharaoh absolutely pounced on the opportunity. He mobilized his elite military force, bringing out exactly 600 chosen chariots to hunt down the trapped Israelites. Now, to put that into perspective, these chariots, they were the armored tanks of the ancient world. Literally the absolute pinnacle of military tech at the time. A fleeing civilian population wouldn't stand a chance against that. Now, before we get into the actual clash, we need to touch on a really fascinating historical debate about where this ultimate dead end actually happened. The story itself is incredibly famous, of course, but scholars are basically split into two main camps on the geography here. Okay, so the first theory suggests the crossing took place at what the original Hebrew calls Yam Suph. That translates to the Sea of Reeds. This points us to a shallower, kind of marshy area just north of the main Red Sea. And it makes sense to a lot of scholars because, well, reeds don't exactly grow in deep saltwater, right? So it suggests a network of lakes where the water could realistically be parted by a massive wind. But then you have the second theory, which points much further south to the really deep waters of the Gulf of Aqaba. Some modern researchers are huge proponents of this spot because of these incredibly unique, almost wheel-like coral formations found down on the seabed. Now, while that evidence is definitely hotly debated, the deep water topography of the Gulf of Aqaba perfectly fits the description of being completely physically shut in by towering mountains. But honestly, regardless of the exact GPS coordinates, the reality on the ground was absolutely terrifying for the Israelites. Just picture this for a second. You look up and you see this massive, dust-kicking Egyptian army bearing down on you. You've got an ocean in front of you, mountains closing in on your sides, and 600 elite chariots gunning for you from behind. Literally no way out. And their immediate reaction? It just brilliantly captures their sheer panic. It's basically a total psychological breakdown. They don't just run away. They break out some highly dramatic sarcasm. They literally turn to Moses and yell, "Because there were no graves in Egypt, hast thou taken us away to die in the wilderness?" I mean, wow. It perfectly highlights their absolute terror and instant crushing regret. What's really fascinating here is this human element. It's like they caught a sudden, massive case of spiritual amnesia. Think about it. It had only been a few weeks, maybe even just days, since they watched these catastrophic plagues utterly dismantle the mighty Egyptian empire. But the very second a new, immediate threat pops up, poof, they completely forget that past deliverance, like it never even happened. So with this widespread panic exploding all around him, look at how Moses handles it. He doesn't yell back, he doesn't panic. Instead, he drops this incredibly definitive three-part command: "Fear ye not. Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord." Boom. He forcefully pivots their focus entirely away from their very real human anxiety and points it directly toward divine action. Moses' ability to just stay completely cool under this kind of pressure is honestly extraordinary. He acts as this crucial, steadying buffer between a totally panicking population and their God. He's leaning heavily on his really unique background here, that mix of Egyptian royal education and his rugged desert survival training. So his knee-jerk reaction in a crisis wasn't to freak out, it was to lead. And that's a habit of obedience he built up during far less stressful times. Okay, but this brings us right back to our core mystery. Yes, Moses is managing the crisis like a boss, but if God intended to save the Israelites all along, why engineer such a terrifying, seemingly impossible dead end right there at the shoreline? Why put them through all that intense trauma? Well, it turns out this wasn't some geographic blunder at all. Actually, it was a highly calculated divine strategy. This whole setup was designed not just for a quick getaway, but to secure a definitive, permanent victory, one that would literally echo through the rest of human history. The master plan here was to confidently draw Pharaoh out of his territory. By making Israel look like easy prey, it provoked Pharaoh's hardened heart enough to make him deploy his entire military machine. And the ultimate goal? To gain absolute glory by decisively neutralizing the Egyptian military threat once and for all. God was making sure they could never, ever pursue Israel again. So with the trap perfectly set, the Israelites completely boxed in, and the overconfident enemy lured right up to the shoreline, that's when the incredible physical mechanics of this escape actually kick in. The actual instrument used for this escape was a strong east wind. Basically, it acted like a targeted, divine megafan. It blew with this immense, sustained pressure. But it didn't just casually push the water aside. It blasted straight down into the seabed, simultaneously holding back an unimaginable volume of water on two parallel sides. And this precise aerodynamic control is what created a perfectly dry vacuum tunnel straight through the middle of the sea. Seriously, if that wind hadn't been perfectly controlled, it would have just blown the people right away. But instead, it allowed roughly 2 million Israelites to walk safely across on dry ground, flanked by these massive, towering walls of water. Then, the second the Israelites were safely across, that divine protection separating the two camps totally shifted. The pursuing Egyptian army, completely blinded by the chase, rushed headlong right into the dry seabed, and suddenly, God throws them into total chaos. The mechanics of the miracle shift from protection to outright destruction, actively jamming up those heavy chariot wheels so they can barely even move. Finally, right as morning breaks, Moses stretches out his hand. The massive wind completely subsides, and those towering walls of water just collapse. The sea returns to its full strength, completely sweeping away the pursuers in an instant. Not a single survivor of the elite Egyptian army was left. So you see, the trap they thought was set for Israel was actually a trap set for them all along. As we wrap up today, this ancient text leaves us with a really profound psychological question. Because just like the Israelites, we are all going to face moments where we feel totally hemmed in by our own insurmountable dead ends. And when that happens to you, do you let spiritual amnesia take over and make you panic? Or do you find a way to just stand still, hold your ground, and wait to see how a path might unexpectedly open up right in front of you? Definitely something to think about. Thanks so much for hanging out and learning with us today, and we'll see you in the next explainer.